Richard Serrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
With Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
And welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. Carlos Cagina is our technical producer. Ryan White is our live stream producer. Check out my YouTube channel, Strange Planet, and my Rumble channel, Richard Serrett Strange Planet. Whitley Strieber is well known as both a horror novelist and for his nonfiction work as someone who's experienced the paranormal. And if you're not familiar with his book, Communion, you really need to read that. And also, I hope you had an opportunity to hear Whitley on my program, or on, this program about a year ago, actually, when he had just released Jesus, A New Vision. I was joined at that time with by my co-host, special guest host, Victor Vigiani. And we had 2 hours, and Whitley really laid out the whole incident that occurred December 26, 1985. And we have an hour tonight. We don't have time, obviously, to revisit that. So I'm encouraging you to go back, listen to the old program. Perhaps I'll publish that as a podcast. And also read Communion. But he's featured prominently in a brand new documentary film directed by John Yost. It's titled Alien Abduction Answers. Alien Abduction Answers. And it receives its world premiere in March at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That's happening March 4th to the 6th. Here's a little taste of that.
This is not communication.
All right. Sorry about that. We had a little technical issue there. I'm going to try and play that clip again here for you. Here we go.
This is not communication. It's communion. Hundreds of thousands of people have claimed contact. That will change you. It changed me.
Lost in between two worlds and two dreams.
This was something that I kept buried for years. Strange things would happen. I didn't want anything to do with it anymore.
He came at me, and I fought for my life.
Ships started to pop up in the sky, and there's this bizarre disk of light. And it was moving across the sky very fast.
The experience is often very terrifying.
If I felt fear, I would crawl under my covers, hoping that it would go away, whatever it was.
I know that we were put in that craft. I knew I was going to go to another planet.
And the being was right next to my face.
He saw two shadow beings. That's when I felt like I was going to die.
I had a real encounter with something. Even if I had to live with the fear, is to know the truth. Is to know.
There you are. That's Alien Abduction Answers. Again, premiering in March at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Here's what luminary UFO researcher Dr. Jacques Vallée says about Whitley Strieber in the film by articulating the ordeal of abduction in his uniquely brilliant and personal style. Whitley Strieber has allowed all of us to share in experiences that challenge ordinary reality and the meaning of life itself. He has given a voice to thousands of witnesses in ways that other analysts have failed to convey. Whitley Strieber, the author of over 30 best-selling books, including the best-selling account of his own close encounter, Communion, a true story. He also wrote the Coming Global Superstorm with Art Bell. He's produced a television special based on his book Confirmation for NBC. Other works include Supernatural, A New Vision of the Unexplained, written with Professor Jeffrey Kripal, and his Alien Hunter novels were adapted for television and can be seen on the Sci-Fi Channel. His website, the world's most popular site featuring topics at the edge of science and culture, is unknowncountry.com. And again, Whitley featured in the brand new documentary film Alien Abduction Answers. Whitley, welcome back to the program. How are you?
It's good to be back, and I'm fine.
And it was great to speak with you. We had 2 hours last night on Coast. This is
That's
kind of
right.
more of a truncated version. We have an hour. And I mentioned that you were on the program before. It was actually last year, I think, after Jesus, A New Vision came out with Victor Viggiani.
New Vision.
That's right, A New Vision. And we had an opportunity to speak at length about your ordeal on December 26, 1985. So I'm encouraging people to go back and listen to that show, and hopefully they heard you on Coast as well last night. I wanted to jump ahead, though, and ask you, because I mentioned Dr. Jacques Vallée, and he was featured in a recent edition of Wired magazine, and he was interviewed, and he said that he has no idea what the whole UFO phenomenon is all about. Even at this point, he has no idea. I just want your comments on that.
I can tell you, and I'm sure Jacques can too. We've known each other for many years, of course, and what we think it's about, and I don't know if what he thinks it may be about, and what I think it may be about are the same. But Jacques is one of the most interesting researchers out there because of the way he handles the ambiguity of the situation. We have, on the one hand, solid objects. Some of the research that Jacques has presented publicly suggests that we even have some very strange materials that can't be manufactured on Earth. I'm pretty sure it was Jacques that did that research, and yet at the same time, there's something very immaterial about all of this stuff. It's something. Well, my way of talking about this is in stories, and I can tell you a story that illustrates this, the way this lives kind of on the shadow line between the world that we know and apparently some other world that's right here that we don't. This is the story. This happened at the little cabin and my wife Ann and I used to own in upstate New York, about 90 miles north of New York City. The same place Communion event happened. This is about 2 or 3 years later. We had begun having groups of people up to the cabin because it turns out that these visitors who had started to come back after I started walking out in the woods and trying to indicate my willingness to continue with them, they did. They started coming back, and so we had people up, and so that other people could encounter them, and that happened a lot. And one particular night was very special. There were my son and I were camping out in the woods because his bedroom was being used as a guest room because the house was packed. In one room was a friend who's still very much with us, Raven Dana. In the next room was Ann's longtime secretary, Laurie Barnes, who's passed on. Ann was upstairs, and a filmmaker and his wife were in the living room on the convertible couch with a low-light camera pointing down the hall. That was the situation in the house. Lori had seen her dead brother walking on the road just about sunset. And this is one of the strangest things about the experience, the UFO experience, or the close encounter experience, that keeps people like Jock and me guessing. We knew by then, Ann and I did, that when someone would report the appearance of a dead person, almost inevitably the visitors, the seeming aliens, would show up that night. So Ann and I were kind of expecting this to happen, and sure enough, sometime after midnight, Raven Dana was awakened by something punching her on the shoulder. No, something dropped down onto the bed. She opened her eyes, and it was, she thought it was a raccoon at first. But then she realized that, she was living actually in a fortress that all the windows, screens were screwed closed and everything. I was fairly obsessive about this at that time. And so then she goes, my God, it's one of Whitley's people. And then she heard it say, what can I do? Or something, words to that effect. And she said you could walk down that hall, which is where the low light camera was. And I don't want to disappoint anybody. We didn't get any imagery. Okay. So it goes down the hall and it wakes up Laurie Barnes. And they have a brief encounter, and Laurie Barnes tells it to go down the hall too. And the next thing you know, now it's some time passes. Laurie and Raven are both awake, but they don't communicate. You're not going to fall asleep after this thing happens. So then they hear shout in the living room, and this is just in the pre-dawn. And what has happened is this: the filmmaker woke up a little bit before dawn and saw what he described as a little man with a huge head looking down at him from beside the bed. And it scared the hell out of him. And then this being's head turned into the head of a hawk and disappeared. And he and his wife were awake, because they were talking about what they'd seen, and they didn't know quite what to make of it, because they certainly weren't expecting. They were Hollywood types. They weren't expecting this to be anything real in any way. And God knows when that's what's real, you're going to be pretty confused. So anyway, dawn comes, and my son and I come walking up from the woods, which entails walking up a path and over a little hill, and then you can see the deck with our pool and walkway, and then the front porch going off from the deck. And what happens is this: we see a hooded figure, but it's not solid; it's translucent. It comes out of the front door, comes down the porch, crosses the deck, and then goes off into the woods, racing wildly between the trees. In other words, it wasn't a ghost, or it wouldn't have had to avoid the trees.
Right.
So whatever it was, and we get into the house, and the filmmaker and his wife are on their feet, because the something has blasted the bed with so much heat that it frightened them. They thought the bed had caught on fire. And that happened when this thing left. And I discussed this extensively with some scientists, and because there was no question that this happened. It wasn't a group hallucination or anything. The people weren't even in the same room together when it happened. So here's what apparently happened. whatever this entity was, it could bend light. But in order to do that, and that was why it could make itself invisible, in order to do that, it would have had to have control of a very powerful gravity field that would surround its body so that the light would go around it and you wouldn't see it. And when that control was released, it would have been collecting a lot of heat. The energy would have been generating a lot of heat. That heat was what, when it began to leave, realized that we were coming in and it was going to have to get out of the house because otherwise there was going to be too many people around. Someone was going to walk into it. It released some of the energy as heat. That's what they felt, the filmmaker and his wife felt. Then it was translucent to myself and my son because it was, it hadn't completely released all of the heat. It wasn't completely visible. It was still using its protective invisibility to a degree. Now, you put all of that together, and then you understand very clearly why Jacques Vallée says he does not know what this is all about. I don't either.
Right.
Because the dead, here's the story that started it all, is Laurie Barnes and the dead brother.
Yeah.
Walking along the road in the evening, having an evening walk. And suddenly there's her brother, who she hasn't seen in years because he disappeared 20 years before and was declared dead by the FBI. And she's then suddenly, there he is, standing big as life in this brown sort of monk's cowl. And she says, "Oh my God, come down and meet my friends." And he smiles and he said, I just wanted to let you know I'm all right. And he kind of drifts back into the woods and disappears. And if you read the letters that we got, thousands of letters, and quite a few of them have incidents in them where a person's dead, their dead friends and so forth.
Well, that happened to you as well, Whitley, because again, that part of that, the night of the 26th of December, 1985, you saw a friend that you had known from grade school who later went on to join the CIA.
Right.
And you thought that, he was involved in, you were having some kind of a psychotic episode, or maybe there were, I don't know, you were drugged, you were being punished for some of your a previous book that may have upset the Reagan administration. You thought that maybe he, as part of the CIA, was in on this. You called his brother and found out that he too had died the previous year. So again, there's that thread.
That's right. Well, I was paranoid as hell. I was grasping at straws at that point because I had seen him there and big as life. And he even talked to me extensively about the stealth aircraft, which were very top secret. And he was saying that the exhaust manifold on these aircraft was defective and they were going to catch fire. And I didn't know, I don't know anything about airplanes. I knew they existed. That stealth planes existed, but they were a deep, dark secret at that time. And it turns out that later on, I think one or two of them did catch fire, and they did have to rebuild the exhaust manifold, if I'm not correct. And I might not be. I don't know. It's not something I don't keep up with technology. I'm no good at it. All I can do is break computers. But he was there, and so that was the first indication of this connection. And that means to me that this is not what we would think of as aliens from another planet. This is something way weirder than that. Way weirder.
Absolutely.
And, Jacques acknowledges that. He's right.
The new documentary is Alien Abduction, Answers, and directed by filmmaker John Yost, and that is premiering March 4th to the 6th. There's a film festival in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And is that the what is that called? The Midwest Weird Fest. The Midwest Weird Fest, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, March 4th to the 6th. We're heading into a break here, so I just want to throw this question out and we'll address it after. But I wanted to ask you, I didn't have a chance to ask you on Coast last night. And when you wrote Communion, and somehow something happened, the publisher got a hold of it, and you later went on to meet Bud Hopkins before the book came out, obviously. But and he tried to turn you on to hypnosis in order to unbury these memories of what happened that night. Something happened with you and Bud after the Communion came out. He got upset with you, and I've never quite understood what that was about. Can we just touch on that when we come back?
Sure.
All right. Whitley Strieber stays with us, the author of Communion, 30 other amazing pieces of work. UnknownCountry.com is the website. We'll come back and discuss further. Stay with us.
You want the truth? You can have.
Hey there, I'm hard at work on another edition of Inner Sanctum, my free monthly newsletter. Inner Sanctum features my monthly brief, a column of my thoughts and opinions on what's happening in the world. It features a spotlight on a past guest, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of my weekly syndicated radio program, The Conspiracy Show. It features a look at this month in conspiracy and UFO history, and my Conspiracy Unlimited podcast episode pick of the month, and so much more. To get your free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, delivered to your email inbox, just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Inner Sanctum and register. It's fast, easy, and again, absolutely free.
Only thing stronger than us is you.
Magic trick number 29. Introducing the shrinking heating bill trick. Windows for magic.
Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We're now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return your seats and food trays to their upright position and make sure your carry-on luggage is safely stowed. You're about to leave everything you know behind. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Strange Planet.
Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard live, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
There was a flash, and then we were gone.
I had this feeling that I was being watched.
I know that we were put in that craft. I knew I was going to go to another planet.
I was having experiences that were unexplainable.
That's what Estrangers began.
We saw two shadow beings walking through our hallway.
His head started to turn.
And the being was right next to my face.
This is not a dream. This is real.
That's when I felt like I was going to die.
But what are they? What are they there for? Because they mean something.
You all thought I was crazy.
Who's crazy now?
There you go. That's the teaser from Alien Abduction Answers, directed by John Yost and featuring our guest tonight, Whitley Strieber. And this is premiering in March at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That's happening March 4th and 6th of this year. So I wanted to ask you about your relationship with Bud Hopkins, because after this happened in December of 1985, and you decided to go meet with Bud Hopkins. He lived not too far away from you in Manhattan, and then he, I guess, put you on to, was it Dr. Donald Klein, the forensic hypnotherapist, who would help you sort of piece all of this together, what happened to you that night. And then Communion came out, in which you told the story of what happened. And something happened between your writing and the publication of it, and it upset Bud. And
well, it did upset Bud, and I'll tell you what it was. Well, there were two things. First, Bud had a very specific idea about what was going on. He felt like this was about people from another planet coming here and exploiting us and engaging in scientific experiments with us. And he did not think this was good. But he was a man with a very big heart. He was a very feeling man and a very smart man as well. He also had a fabulous sense of humor and a wonderful store of jokes. He was a fun guy to be with, in my experience. And in any case, but this was his mindset. And we got involved with Jacques Vallée and his book, Passport to Magonia, which shows cases from, I mean, when I say we, I mean me and Anne, cases going back thousands of years of similar events happening. Not to say that this has been the same for thousands of years, because it hasn't. It's much more intense now than it was ever before. But there's something about it that kind of fits into our mythology. And Bud just absolutely, that was not something he approved of. And my references to that in Communion bothered him a lot. He thought the book was too over the top. But then something happened that was a disaster, because I really loved Bud, and I loved being with him, and so did Anne. He was a wonderful man. But what happened was this. For reasons known only to the publisher of my book, they secretly sent it out to the bookstores without telling the bookstores or me that it was going out. And Bud had expected that he had a book coming out too, and he had expected that we would publish our books simultaneously and go on the road together. But then suddenly, 6 weeks or something before his book was due to come out, my book appeared in the stores, and he thought I had shafted him. He thought I had done it, and he never would divert from that belief. And I can't blame him. I mean, because all I could do was say that, I was blindsided. I didn't know it was going to happen, which was true. But it ruined our relationship, unfortunately.
Oh, that is unfortunate.
Hopkins and me.
That is so unfortunate.
That does not mean I don't respect his work and his efforts and love him as a human being, because those things are all true also.
But this idea that this is obviously, far more than just extraterrestrials coming from another planet. There are so many other elements here, elements of perhaps the supernatural, visitations from people that have passed on that seem to be...
Bud's idea that was all of that stuff was just static and noise and stuff thrown up by them to make it seem like something that it wasn't. That was his position. And who knows? I'm not saying he was wrong. I'm only saying that what we can see suggests that it's much stranger than that.
And a permanent part of our reality. I mean, not only throughout history, but it's there. I think John Yost said it's like only certain people manage to sort of accidentally bump into it, but it's there for all of us. It's part of our existence, right?
Right. We were talking about that on Coast, and I brought up the story of the crowd of people who were with these aliens, apparent aliens, on the roadside, and in Queens. And there's just something going on here that we don't quite get. And Bud thought we did get it, and everything that was said contrary to aliens coming here in flying saucers and screwing with people was wrong. And I don't believe it. I'll tell you another story that is really a deep and in some ways a heartrending but beautiful story. I got a call from my agency, from the William Morris Agency, was my agent at the time, about saying that there was this man who was desperate to reach me. And I thought to myself, you know, if he's gone so far as to find my agency, this is before the internet, you couldn't just Google somebody. This guy really wants to reach me. And I'm not hard to reach anyway. I correspond with people with email and stuff all the time. And I've never been one to shut myself away from people. So I called the guy, and this is the story he told. He was sitting in his living room with his wife at about 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night. Their elderly dog was asleep on the hearth. Their little boy, 7 years old, was asleep in his bedroom upstairs. The dog became nervous, which was very unusual, and wanted to go out a second time that night, which is highly unusual. So the wife gets the little dog leashed up and takes him out, and as she's opening the front door, she sees a fireball go across the sky and disappear behind the trees. And she calls out to her husband, "You're going to get a phone call soon because I just saw a plane going in on fire." And he was with the FAA, and so he he would have been involved if there'd been a crash. The next moment, though, their little 7-year-old comes running downstairs saying, "Mommy, Daddy, Mommy, Daddy. Joey just came into my room with these little men, and he told me to tell you that he's all right." And the man called me because he wanted to know if there was any reason whatsoever to believe that what his son had said might have actually happened, because the older boy had been killed in a car accident the week before.
Wow.
And I could say to him truthfully, that is not an unusual story. There are many people who have had similar experiences with this. And I believe that happened. I mean, a 7-year-old doesn't just dream something like that up. I don't think he can.
No.
In other words, he doesn't have any information in his mind, especially not then, that would enable him to come up with something like that, because the idea of apparent aliens and the dead being intermixed was just not in the world at the time at all. I think it was real. But just, no, he couldn't handle it.
It's far more than just, I guess sci-fi tropes, if you will, and gray aliens coming down and taking aboard people and flying off to another planet. It's so much more complex than that.
Part of it, though, wouldn't it? I'd love to fly off to another planet if I could come back, and if it would be a place where I could survive and see it. I bet everybody listening would love to see it too. Something like that too would be incredibly cool.
Whitley, we're gonna take another time out. We'll come back. Whitley Strieber stays with us, and again, the new documentary is Alien Abduction Answers, directed by John Yost, premiering at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, March 4th and 6th. Back with more of our conversation right after these.
I don't need to tell you how important building and sustaining a healthy immune system is these days. And just in time, my good friends at Get the Tea are offering a special package called the Immune Builder. You get 1 month's supply of Life Change Super Tea. That's 8 bags. 1 bottle of BioAstin. That's 75 capsules. Now, BioAstin, or astaxanthin, is known as one of nature's most powerful antioxidants and provides a wide range of impressive health benefits. The Immune Builder Trailer also includes 1 bottle of potent sea wild Alaskan sockeye omegas. That's 90 gel caps. And 1 copy of the book Natural Astaxanthin, Hawaii's Super Nutrient by Dr. William Sears. There's so much more than tea at getthetea.com. Get your immune builder right now. Not available in any store. Use the code UNLIMITED and all your purchases ship for free. The Immune Builder from getthetea.com.
With Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio. To reach Richard, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
We're back with Whitley Strieber, and we're talking about the abduction phenomenon. And the new film is Alien Abduction Answers. That's directed by John Yost. We're going to dip into the live stream chat here in a moment, Whitley, and take some questions. People are lining up with questions. But I just wanted to ask you, we were talking about how whatever this is, and this phenomenon is, that it's far more complex than extraterrestrials. But it seems to be a permanent part of our existence, a part of life, who we are, what we are. But as to the question, I don't know if you've come up with any answers. Why certain people? Why you? Why not me? Is there something about your makeup? Why certain people are able to see these things and experience these things and others will never?
Well, that's a good question. I certainly have thought a lot about that. There is some research. I believe it's Dr. Gary Nolan was interviewed about this research on, was it The Debrief? Anyway, he was interviewed about it recently, and what he's done is he's examined the brains of people who have had these experiences and found that there's some brain structures that are a little different from most people's. And it could be that is because it's because these people happen to be born this way, that they can see something that actually happens more often than we would think. That maybe it happens more often to more people, and unless you just happen to be born this way, you don't realize it. We were talking again last night on our coast about missing time.
Yes.
And it might be that people have a lot more missing time than they realize, and they just don't notice it. And that this is just part of life. And we're just becoming to realize that things are not what they seem at all in this world, which is a really cool speculation. But there could be other reasons, like I happen to be in sort of the right place at the right time, I guess. And I'd had this experience as a child, apparently, although I've not ever been sure about that. And if you talk to most of the people who have had the experience, the abduction or another type of close encounter, it's usually something that goes back in their childhoods. And as often as not, it's also familial, although I don't think it was in my case. I don't think my parents had anything like this happen to them.
Well, in terms of right place, right time, your vacation home in Kingston, New York, where this took place in December 26, 1985, is there something, is that part of the Hudson, is that considered part of the Hudson Valley? Because, I mean, that has long been kind of a hot spot for...
Well, the hot spot is on the other side of the river in Dutchess County. That's where the Hudson Valley UFO sightings were. But yeah, this is part of the Hudson Valley. I was in part of the Hudson Valley, just south of I was south of Kingston, south of the Catskills, in an area called the Shangam Mountains. But the thing that's interesting about that area, where I was, is there's a huge seam of iron under it. And so I've always had the sense that it was something about that unusual geologic structure that made it easier for this to manifest itself physically than than it can in other places, or something like that. I mean, I thought there might be some connection. Let me put it that way, but I can't tell you that I know what it was.
Right, right. I wonder how Bud Hopkins would have felt about that. I mean, it does. It just further muddies the water in a sense, doesn't it? It makes it even far more complex when we start thinking about, soil composition and what does that have to do with, all of this. I want to go to the YouTube live chat. YY writes, Whitley, was Wolfen based on a personal experience, and why did you write it?
It wasn't based on a personal experience. The last time I looked, I had not been eaten by highly intelligent wolves. But it was. Wait a minute. I know, but that jogged my memory. Of course it was. I'll tell you what happened. We were living, Ann and I were living on West 76th Street, I think, just off of Central Park, on Central Park West at the time. And I was working in the advertising business. I had not yet become a published writer. And I had a bout of insomnia. And I was awake in the night a lot. And one night I decided I would take a walk because it's a beautiful neighborhood. And I walked over to Central Park West, which borders the park. And I'm walking along the wall on the park side, and I came to 72nd Street where you can walk into the park, and I thought, it's street lights, and I'll walk through the park. Nobody is there. Any mugger who's hanging out in the park's going to starve to death, right? I mean, there's nobody's out there. So I walked on into the park, and I ended up on the literary walk that is heads into Bethesda Fountain, and I'm walking along. And it's dark, and I'm thinking to myself, "What a fool you've been!" Now I'm scared. It's too dark, but I'm walking along, and I realize that there's something is shadowing me, and I think to myself, "Oh my, now what?" So I'm walking pretty fast, and I'm heading back I want to get out of there right quick. And this is obviously animals, and there's a lot of them. And as I come at some point into a street light, it's a bunch of shaggy street dogs.
Whoa.
Feral dogs. And I don't think they were hostile. They were just probably would love to have gotten petted and fed. But when I got home, I thought about them. I was sad for them on the one hand. On the other hand, it was so scary. For a minute there, I could have easily believed it was a pack of wolves. And that's where the idea of the Wolfen started.
Fantastic insights. Wonderful. Great question, YY. Thank you for twigging that memory with Whitley.
Listener, because I almost forgot about it. It's been so long since I told that story, but that's how it started.
There you go. All right, we'll take a quick time. I'll come back. More questions from the YouTube live chat and more conversation. Whitley Strieber, again, the new documentary, Alien Abduction, Answers, directed by John Yost, premiering at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, March 4th and 6th. Back with more right after these.
This is no place for the night.
25 years, our mission has never changed. Attract the best.
This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Follow Richard on Twitter at Richard Syrett. For show information, visit the website strangeplanet.ca.
Find out what's possible for you. Google Herzig Eye Institute. Call us for a consultation.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
This is no place for the naive or the faint-hearted. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio.
And a few minutes remain with Whitley Strieber. UnknownCountry.com is the website. And we're talking about, among other things, the new film, Alien Abduction, Answers, directed by John Yost. Whitley features prominently in the film. Before I go back to the questions in the YouTube live chat, there came a point when you were no longer frightened of these visitations by these, these blue trolls and these insectoid type creatures with the big eyes. What do you? What?
One of the things, I didn't see them all that often either. I mean, I think if I had, it might be not so easy.
But if you were speaking with someone who had recently been traumatized by an abduction or a visitation, what would you say to them in order to help them transition from the fear into I don't know, kind of this state of enlightenment or this maturation process?
I don't think you're gonna succeed if you try to suppress the fear. It's real and it's there, and it feels often very much like a dangerous experience. And the hard part of it is that you can't necessarily do anything to change it, stop it. I mean, people have all kinds of things, prayers and this and that, but not to say it, there's no point in trying, but when the thing is a physical experience, they're in control. Let me put it that way. I learned to live with the fear as my partner, not to suppress it. And that made me very careful, but I made the decision that I was going to do this. And I went out in the woods night after night doing it, and it was often very scary. I didn't see them but once or twice in all that time, but when I did, it was really incredible. The one time that was most incredible was when I woke up because there was a sound like a great horn sounding over the woods near the house. This is a February morning. I think it must have been 89 or 90, maybe 88. I don't remember the exact date. And I thought that can't be anything but them, because nothing around here is going to make a noise like that. It was cold. I got slippers and robe on and went outside. And I went on to I went past that deck I talked about a little while ago and up the little hill. And then I could see down through the naked woods, this winter naked woods, I could see this dark shape in a little clearing that was beyond these woods. And there were figures standing beside it. I couldn't make them out, but they were there. I could tell they were there in the pre-dawn, just barely coming light. And I stopped. And because I had, my house behind me and my family in the house and my wife and our little boy, and this total unknown experience ahead of me. And then I hear in my head, and I'll explain in a minute why that happened and why I heard this sound, because I know what the technology is now. This voice very rough voice come on, come on. And, you hear something like that, and you're not necessarily going to come on. And this was my fear walking beside me, telling me, no, don't be a fool. That voice does not sound like something you're going to want, somebody you're going to have a good time with. So you just go it, guy. Then the fear wasn't gone. The fear was helping me. My fear was my friend at that moment. And so I turn around and I go back to the house. But now this experience is so rich and so complex. Another level unfolds. I put my hand on the doorknob and I hear from above the woods 3 cries that remain to this day the most emotionally complex richest, saddest sounds I have ever heard uttered in my life. I go into the house. I go and I'm sitting on my bedside. And suddenly, I'm aware of the fact that there's some invisible presence in the house, because they would come in the house invisibly, and we could all, at least Ann and I, and certainly the cats, were well aware of their presence when they were in the house. And so I knew this thing was in the house right there. And the next thing I knew, I'm sort of gliding along in this strange room with these tall sort of sticks sticking up, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell has happened now. And then I recognize where I am. I'm in my mother's bedroom as it existed when I was a baby. They have taken me back and opened up something in the deep corners of my mind to the point where I first walked.
Dear Lord.
Took my first steps. And then it's over. And I'm left sitting there thinking, God, shouldn't I have not listened to my fear and gone down there? And this day, I do not know whether I made the right decision or not. But I do know this. They at least left me with two things. Well, three things. One, there's somebody very rough and tough involved in this. Two, there is someone with a higher level of emotions than we have. And three, they have extraordinary powers of mind, and they communicate using those powers of mind. You know, I was told when I was sitting on that bed and plunged back into my babyhood, I was told, Whitley, you just took your first step.
Aha. Wow. Wow.
So that's what it's like to live in this experience. It's not like living normal life, and fear is going to always be an important part of it, and for many years and generations, because whether we know it or not, we are all doing this together. We're in this together. We are in contact with whatever this is, and we're going to do this together. And as the species becomes more and more confident in its relationship with this, the fear will drop. All of our fear, not just mine or yours, but everyone. It will be a community journey. And that's another reason Ann called the book Communion, because it's about community as well.
Right, right. It's so complex. It's so incredibly complex. I just have time for one quick question. Let me see here. Well, everyone wants to talk to you about communion, of course. Not Gordian asks how accurate the movie version of Communion was, the one with Christopher Walken.
I wouldn't say it was accurate. They tried, of course. I mean, but they didn't have enough money for the special effects, and I think there was a general feeling on the set that it was all a big joke, kind of. And I wrote a script, but they didn't use much of the script, and
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, but but I will say this in the defense of the film, it communicates the flavor of the experience very well. It does. It definitely does.
Solar Warden asks, any plans for a remake?
History and the sense of threat and the weirdness that comes across in the film pretty clearly.
Okay. Solar Warden asks if there's any plans for a remake. Would you like to remake the movie?
Well, there was one of the cable channels was going to do a series based on Communion, and we were pretty far along with it until some exec says, "Hey, wait a minute! This is this BS guy with the aliens. Get rid of it." So that got tossed out the window. But maybe someone will catch it on the way down, because after all, the number of people who have that attitude toward this is dropping, and the number of people who are willing to listen and take a look at it is rising. and Communion is out there ready to be made into a series at any time.
Fantastic. Well, and I think if people, or once they see alien abduction answers, that's going to go a long way of moving the needle as well, because the people that are featured in this documentary, these are our neighbors, these are our friends, these are not just some people over there that this happened to. They represent all of us, really.
It is far the most powerful documentary about the abduction experience, and the most intelligent, in my opinion, that I've ever seen.
All right. Well, kudos to you, Whitley, and also everyone, of course, who participated in the film, and director John Yost. And again, that's premiering at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, March 4th and 6th. Whitley, always a delight. I hope we can do this again soon.
Thank you very much. It's always a delight, for sure.
Whitley Strieber, unknowncountry.com. Check out his fabulous website, unknowncountry.com. All right, when we come back, U.S. Attorney John O'Connor and Hillary Clinton and her campaign. Was she, in fact, spying on the Trump campaign and the Trump White House? That story next.
Richard Syrett's Strange Planet, following the truth wherever it leads, exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites, revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality, coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
With Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio.
Hey, thanks for inviting me into your home. Your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi. Your parents' well-appointed basement with a simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker. Your loft. That greasy spoon just off the interstate in your cabin in the woods. Once again, Carlos Cagina is our technical producer, and Ryan White is our live stream producer. Check out my YouTube channel, Strange Planet, and my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. This hour, remember this? Trump on 60 Minutes with Leslie Stahl back in October 2020, just before the elections.
Biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign. They spied on my campaign.
There's no real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
No.
It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir,
they spied on my campaign and they got caught.
Can I say something? You know, this is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on.
There you go. Donald Trump was adamant his campaign was being spied on. I mean, he was talking about this beginning in 2016. He said the phones have been tapped. The phones have been tapped. Now, that's kind of an arcane reference, an archaic reference. You don't tap phones anymore in the digital age. But that's the language he was using. And he was pilloried in the legacy media for those claims. Well, that story isn't going away. In fact, it's really, really starting to ramp up. U.S. Special Counsel John Durham, remember him? He's been quiet, but he's been slowly and quietly investigating the origins of the Russian collusion hoax and the phony Trump-Russia dossier that tried to derail the Trump campaign and then later thwart his presidency. On Friday, February the 12th, U.S. Special Counsel John Durham filed a motion alleging that lawyers for the Clinton campaign paid a technology company to infiltrate servers belonging to Trump Tower and later the Trump White House in order to establish an inference and narrative to bring a government agencies linking Donald Trump to Russia. Durham filed a motion Feb 11th focusing on potential conflicts of interest related to the representation of former Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussman, who has since been charged with making a false statement to a federal agent. Sussman has pled not guilty. The indictment against Sussman says he told then FBI General Counsel James Baker in September 2016, less than 2 months before the presidential election, that he was not doing work for any client when he requested and held a meeting in which he presented purported data and white papers that allegedly demonstrated a covert communications channel between the Trump Organization and Alpha Bank, a Russian bank with ties to the Kremlin. Here to make sense of all of this, U.S. Attorney John O'Connor. John's a former assistant U.S. attorney in Northern California, representing the United States in both criminal and civil cases. He's perhaps most famous for representing former deputy director of the FBI and Watergate whistleblower Mark Felt, a.k.a. Deep Throat. And he's the author of Postgate, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and began today's partisan advocacy journalism. And he's also the host of the Mysteries of Watergate podcast. John, welcome back. How are you? Oh, do we have John there? Not hearing John O'Connor.
I'm sorry, Richard.
There we are. No worries.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay, good. I had muted myself because I didn't know if I was going to be on TV or whatever.
That's
I've
okay.
got a little picture on your streaming, but let's just chat here and let me respond to what you're saying here. One of the things about the Sussman indictment for not revealing who he was really working for is the most minor of the Sussman crimes. Durham was forced to file that because he filed it 5 days after the 5 years after the meeting. He had a 5-year statute of limitations. And in this particular crime, there was no apparent conspiracy. Now, there's probably a conspiracy, but he couldn't prove it. So if it was a one-off, he had to prove the case. He had to indict the case within 5 years. So the Sussman case was an early harbinger of things to come. The real wrong and the real nasty and dastardly plot of Sussman and company was to go to the FBI, and Durham alludes to this in his indictment, with again a false story of Trump's treasonous connections with Russia using this Alpha Bank server. Now, what Durham told us, and he hasn't indicted this yet, he's got plenty of time to do it, was that they knew everyone involved in this plot, and we now know it's several of these techies, Rodney Jaffe and probably some of the researchers, this L. Gene Camp from Indiana and David Dagan from Georgia Institute of Technology, among others, were all getting together, and they were trying to put together white papers to show falsely for people who didn't know anything about the internet or about these arcane pings from servers, that Trump was communicating with Russia through Alpha Bank. Now, but we in the first. So anyway, that hasn't even been indicted yet. There's going to be about 6 or 7 people indicted for that, Richard, for the Alpha Bank story. Now, what Sussman tells us, and what the Durham tells us in his latest filing, which isn't an indictment, the left-wing press gets all hot and bothered to say, oh, he really didn't commit. He didn't say spying. He didn't say infiltration. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. This was a filing just to get Sussman to waive conflicts and to really make him face them, because Sussman was probably playing a game with him so he could charge a conflict later on. Durham's too smart for that. But the point is, in this latest filing, Durham let a couple cats out of the bag, one of which was they not only came up with the false Alpha Bank story to the FBI, which is a false statement within a matter within the jurisdiction of the FBI, and therefore a crime, but now even after the campaign is lost, they're now trying to discredit Trump's presidency by coming up with not only the Alpha Bank story to the CIA, but they're now coming up with the second one. The second false story is Trump and his people are conversing with Russia through a Russian phone provider. They're pinging all over. They must be using these Russian-made phones in the vicinity of the White House, and Trump Tower, and Trump's apartment building, all to talk to the Russians. Now, of course, it was made-up gobbledygook, and they knew it was false. They just made up stuff to try to, like you said, I think you said the words inference and narrative.
In other words, frame him.
It's arcane stuff that nobody understands. To say, oh, there's a narrative, there's an inference that Trump is colluding with Russians. So this is really nasty stuff. You realize to what extent Hillary was not just passive. It's not as though she hired Christopher Steele, and just sat back, and maybe she thought he was getting something. Maybe she didn't. No. She was behind the whole thing. She had her, and actually her assistant, Jake Sullivan, according to now the declassified notes of the CIA, had made up the whole Russian collusion thing himself. So Hillary made it up. She hires Steele to back it up. She gets the FBI and the CIA to back her on it. She uses Sussman and these other internet people to come up with these phony stories to back up her phony stories. And these people are all over the place trying to first interfere with Trump's campaign, and secondly, to discredit his presidency, all with the compliance of a lapdog media. And that's the other part of this that's terrible. So it's a campaign, it's a government, it's the tech people, and the media. You can't think of a more complete and overwhelming conspiracy to get this guy, whatever you think of Trump, whether he's too blustery and bumptious, all that stuff, but he's a normal citizen. And to see all these forces arrayed against him to stop him is really chilling. It's chilling, and it's one of the worst things. It makes Watergate look like, a kid's birthday party.
And you ought to know, John O'Connor represented Deputy Director of the FBI at the time, Mark Felt, who we later learned was the Watergate whistleblower, the infamous Deep Throat. And John wrote all about it in Postgate, how the Washington Post betrayed Deep Throat, covered up Watergate, and began today's partisan advocacy journalism. So when Trump went on 60 Minutes in October 2020 and said to Leslie Stahl, they spied on my campaign, was he just going on sort of a gut instinct? What did he know? I don't know if you can answer this, but what did he know then that John Durham has now uncovered, or did he? Did he just have a gut feeling?
Well, I think he was probably well advised. I think probably he had heard from some source. Remember, before the FISA-gate thing, Comey and people started getting this Russiagate warrant, and they didn't do it until October of 16. However, Bruce Orr and others had tried to get, and because it's all classified, we don't know exactly what he was trying to get, but he was trying to get some sort of warrant on Trump Tower back in May and June of 16. So this was real disappointing that in one of the few cases where FISA turned somebody down, they turned people down on Trump Tower. But basically, they did try to get a warrant then to spy on Trump Tower. They wanted to get it. Now, what you get, and here's what people need to know, and why Trump was really onto something. And as usual, he bumbles around a bit, but his instincts are very good. And what happens is, anytime you can surveil somebody, the national security rules are you get 2 jumps. And let me tell you what that is. If you surveil Carter Page, people are wondering, why does anybody care about Carter Page? Well, you don't. Carter Page you get 2 jumps from Carter Page. Carter Page talks to, let's say, 9 people in the Trump campaign. Each of those 9 people you can then surveil. You can wiretap them, and you can listen, you can read their emails, and so forth and so on. That's the first jump. The second jump is those people then talk to the next group of people. And if Page talks to Corey Lewandowski and Corey Lewandowski talks to Trump, you can wiretap Trump. And you certainly can wiretap Trump Tower. Any of these people are communicating with Trump Tower. So when Trump says Trump Tower has been wiretapped, he's damn right. You know, now it may just be instinctual. I don't know what he knew. Now, let me add to that, Richard. The Obama administration, again, this is classified, but the word is that they thought that 3 jumps were appropriate because they really like to bend the rules and nobody stops them. They had a 3-jump rule, I am told. I don't know this for sure, but I am told that, and it's out there. And if you had 3 jumps, well, probably 2 jumps will get you everybody you need to know. But
Right.
just in case, you get 3 jumps. Well, that gets you just about everybody in the Washington, D.C. area.
Right.
And
It's like, 3 degrees of separation.
Right. It's 3 degrees of separation, and that's an awful lot. You talk to one person, they talk to others, the others talk to others. Think about that particular pattern, especially politicians who are talking to a lot of people. Their job is to talk to their network. So it's very chilling, and this is a political campaign that they're doing this to. So Trump was actually right, absolutely right. And of course, Leslie Stahl's attitude is, well, you don't know that. How can you say that? We don't know that. But yet at the same time, those same people are very willing to embrace this absurd Russian collusion narrative, which may have been good for a Superman comic book with Lex Luthor, trying to control the world through the United States president. But it is such a paranoid, ridiculous fantasy, so cartoonishly documented by Christopher Steele, yet they'll report on that, and they'll talk about that. But if Trump says he's wiretapped, which he was, oh no, we can't talk about that. So yeah, I mean, this whole thing, everything is turned on its head here, Richard. It's just really terrible.
And let me see if I understand here now, the timeline. So the Clinton campaign hires Christopher Steele. He goes to some intermediaries and they put this ridiculous Russian Trump dossier together, which is a total fabrication. They use that, even though it's totally unverified, and we now know it was totally made up, but it was unverified. They take the dossier, they get the Pfizer warrant. That gives them permission to spy on the Trump campaign. But that doesn't give them, they don't get the warrant to spy on Trump Tower, or do they with that Pfizer warrant?
Well, it doesn't make any difference. When you say it's Carter Page, for example, and they had investigations on 4 people, they certainly got a warrant as to Carter Page as a Russian agent. Now, I'm not sure what the warrant entailed. It may have entailed other people of interest in Carter Page, like Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, and Michael Flynn. It may have included all those 4. But we know, and we just don't know. I mean, actually, we have very little transparency. We know it included Carter Page. Okay, if you have Carter Page, then what you do is everybody that Carter Page talks to, communicates with, now or in the past, remember, by the time they get the warrant, Carter Page isn't even with the campaign. But they can go back and see who you talked to in August or, July. So Carter Page talks to Corey Lewandowski, who I think is his guy, just as a good example. But he emails, let's say, 20 people in the campaign that he's supposed to be doing stuff with. All of those 20 people, the FBI can go in and monitor those 20 people. They can wiretap them. I say wiretap them. They can overhear their phone calls, and they certainly can look at their emails. And it's very easy for them to look at their emails.
Right.
So now they have them sort of, in essence, wiretapping all those people. Now, are any of those people in Trump Tower? Maybe, maybe not. but certainly if he's talked to Corey Lewandowski, he'll be in Trump Tower. Now, that's just the first jump. Now you get to the second jump. So, yes, the whole idea isn't to wiretap Trump Tower. It's to wiretap people who are in Trump Tower or talk to Trump Tower. So you're wiretapping Trump Tower. Now, Trump may have been alluding to the prior failed attempt in May and June of 2016, where they literally tried to wiretap Trump Tower. And I think it might have had to do with a server. I think they were trying to get into Trump's server. So there was an attempt to get right into Trump Tower. Now, that didn't work. The FISA court went, no. I mean, it was too obviously a ridiculous request. But getting to the real FISA warrant, yeah, of course. But let me put it this way: if they didn't get to Trump Tower, there's something the matter.
Okay, but then this latest filing from Durham is talking about Michael Sussman, Clinton campaign lawyer, hiring a tech company or a tech executive. It's this tech company that ends up hacking into the server at Trump Tower, and then later, obviously, this jockey fellow is working on contract inside Washington because he has access to the White House server. He's hired not by the FBI or he's not operating with a FISA warrant. He's hired separately by Michael Sussman to spy on Trump, the Tower during the campaign, and then later the Trump White House when Trump is president. Right? He's not operating with a FISA warrant. He's an inside guy being hired by a Clinton lawyer. That much is clear, right?
Well, yeah, and here's where it gets people. The left-wing press doesn't do this justice, because what happens is there are people. You may have a housekeeper or an assistant, let's say, that comes in and pays your bills and looks at your correspondence. That's legal. That person has access to your stuff. What is wrong is if somebody actually was hiring her to violate your privacy rights. And therefore, you can say she infiltrated your house, and you can say she's spying on you. So what happens is this Rodney Jaffe, a tech exec, his company Newstar, had the right to access and maintain the servers in Trump Tower, and he did a lot of servers. Their company does all these servers. So they had servers in Trump Tower, in Trump's apartment building, and in the White House. And so what he could do is, so those were all perfectly legitimate access.
Right, he doesn't have to hack into them. He has legitimate access to them.
To use it for something else.
Right. And that's something else is to somehow take these disparate parts, little bits of information and pings coming from Russia and wherever, and then grab all that and try and create this pastiche that makes it look like that Trump and Alpha Bank, which has access to the Kremlin, are somehow in cahoots in communication. In other words, this is the inference and the frame. This is the framing. They've taken these little desperate parts of information and tried to create a false narrative. They tried to frame the campaign. Right. And all right, we'll take a quick time out. John O'Connor is with us, host of the Mysteries of Watergate podcast. We'll tell you how to listen, as well as author of the book Postgate: How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. Back with more on the Clinton spy scandal right after these.
Hey there, I'm hard at work on another edition of Inner Sanctum, my free monthly newsletter. Inner Sanctum features my monthly brief, a column of my thoughts and opinions on what's happening in the world. It features a spotlight on a past guest, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of my weekly syndicated radio program, The Conspiracy Show. It features a look at this month in conspiracy and UFO history, and my Conspiracy Unlimited podcast episode pick of the month, and so much more. To get your free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, delivered to your email inbox, just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click click on Inner Sanctum and register. It's fast, easy, and again, absolutely free.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We're now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return your seats and food trays to their upright position and make sure your carry-on luggage is safely stowed. You're about to leave everything you know behind. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Strange Planet.
With Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard live, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
U.S. Attorney John O'Connor stays with us, author of Postgate and host of the podcast, The Mysteries of Watergate. And just go to postgatebook.com, postgatebook.com. You can get the book there, and you can also subscribe to the podcast. It's available everywhere, The Mysteries of Watergate. And we're talking about the Hillary Clinton campaign, spying on not only the Trump campaign, but also the Trump White House. So Michael Sussman, who hired the tech people who had access to the server in Trump Tower and later the Trump White House, and they put this white paper together which framed Trump, drawing inferences between the Trump campaign and this Alpha Bank, which has ties to the Kremlin, and tried to create this collusion. They put that in a white paper. Michael Sussman, who hired these people to do it, then takes that white paper to the FBI, doesn't really reveal to the FBI that he is working for the Hillary Clinton campaign, and says, look what I have here. You should investigate this. And then because he didn't reveal himself as a working for the Clinton campaign, basically he lied to the FBI. That's why he was indicted by John Durham. Correct? Do I have that right?
Well, yes, but as I say, that's the least of his lies.
Right.
The real lie was in both to the FBI in October of 16 and to the FBI in February 17. He is cooking up what Durham can clearly prove is an obviously false story, that all these people, this is what's chilling. They all know it's false. It's not like they're idiots who've come up with this conspiracy theory that's baseless. No, they know it's false. And in the Alpha Bank story, they're communicating with each other how to keep out certain details so that the FBI and the public won't know it's false. In others, they're trying to de-detail it because they know it's false and they don't want anybody to find them out, at least until the FBI has had it for a while so they can leak to the public the FBI is investigating.
Right.
What's terrible about it is the consciousness that everything they're saying is complete BS. Now, let me get to the white paper. The recent thing from Durham that is so chilling is in this foray to the CIA in February of 17, they're coming up with this white paper with the pings and all that. But what they're doing is, it's one thing in my example of you having a housekeeper that's getting into your stuff, and she's giving out truthfully stuff that she's gotten from your desk. This is a case in which they're using the false provenance of having access to these servers as then being a basis for saying they have a foundation for what they're saying, but in fact, the foundation is a pack of lies. And let me give you one major example. It's called Yodaphone. Besides Alpha Bank, you'll hear a lot about Yodaphone. Yodaphone is the Russian phone provider with which Trump was supposedly communicating, and over which he was using Yodaphone wireless devices that were, and all his people were communicating with Russia using those wireless devices. Well, they were using some of the evidence they were using for this cockamamie theory was falsely stated to be stuff that had come from the Trump White House. It really came from the Obama White House, if you can believe it. In other words, the Obama White House had done a few hundred innocent, what they call lookups, where your server communicates to another server someplace that somehow is associated with a Yodaphone server. It can be on anything. It can be, it's minor stuff. There are 3 million lookups every year to this Russian phone provider's different websites. It's nothing. They just have some websites that people, ping and spam and all that stuff. But my point is, they took information that really came from Obama, and they falsely packaged it as coming from Trump, and they falsely packaged the fact that they knew something. So, it's not just that they spied and took true material out. They didn't. They spied, and they used that as a false basis for saying Trump spied.
Right.
And
They tried to frame him.
For the CIA, you think these people know something.
So if you're looking at the Trump campaign and what the Hillary campaign was doing, I suppose maybe you could make an argument, well, that's just dirty politics. You could say it's unethical, it's immoral, but the Clinton campaign was trying to defeat the Trump campaign. Maybe Trump also was trying to dig up stuff on Hillary. That's just dirty politics. How do you respond to that?
Well, to a certain extent, it is a Nixon campaign on steroids. If all now this is what I'm going to say. If all they're doing is like Hillary's tweets in which she's tweeting out nonsense about Russian conspiracies, and Jake Sullivan is. If you talk about that, then all you are is just sort of like the Nixon campaign on steroids, just giving out false campaign information. Maybe it's a misdemeanor, maybe it's not. But what they did is they did something else. They went to government agencies and they gave false stories to government agencies. And that is a crime. Remember, George Papadopoulos was indicted for even giving a false date as to when he started in the Trump campaign. Real minor stuff. You tell it to an agency of the federal government in a matter within their jurisdiction, you've committed a 5-year offense, my man. And that's what these people were doing right, left, and center. They were using the federal government. Now, those were the false statements made to the agencies. That's where Sussman comes in, the Alpha Bank ruse, and now the Yodaphone ruse. Now, the second thing that they did that goes beyond dirty politics is they actually got the FBI to falsely start an investigation. She used Christopher Steele to knowingly put together a false report, which, by the way, used nothing but Russian sources. It was clearly in league with Putin that she was acting, not against Putin. She was in league with Putin, with Putin's people. At least Putin let her do this. Putin let her do this and probably laughed a lot about it. But his guys were on Steele's team, and Steele's one of them, by the way. He's Oleg Deripaska's guy. So they not only were telling false stories to the government, they were sort of infiltrating and working with the government in getting the FBI to start their Russiagate investigation. So now they're using all the power of the federal government, its intelligence agencies. Brennan's doing it over in Europe when he's trapping Papadopoulos. Then Comey starts in. He uses all his investigative resources, including FISA warrants, and they're now after Trump. So it's not just, if she's just out on the stump saying nonsense, that's one thing. But if she makes false stories to the government, that's the second thing. If she's using the government and conspiring with the government so that the government is doing something illegal, the government itself is acting illegally, and she's part of it, that is profoundly disturbing. That is a depth to which American politics has never sunk. A candidate is in league with the CIA and the FBI to cook up knowingly false stories. Now, am I just saying this because I'm, hate Hillary? No, I don't hate Hillary. That's not why I'm saying this. I'm saying this because I've read the Horowitz report, all 434 pages of it. And this is the FBI's own guy who goes out of his way to be nice to the FBI and says some stuff that a lot of people don't disagree with in favor of the FBI. But he says that the FBI concocted 17, count them, 17 false representations to the FISA court in order to get these warrants. 17 false stories / representations to the FISA court. So now we have the FBI, which is supposed to prosecute false stories, is now perpetrating a false story on the FISA court. Now, I'll tell you something even more chilling. Durham has said a while back, along with Barr, that they gave Brennan a pass. I couldn't figure it out, but I thought, well, maybe Brennan was really straight and so forth and so on, in spite of him being a political guy. Well, I come to find out, Richard, I've got in my briefcase a deposition that most people have not read. There are probably 3 people that have. It's a deposition from Seymour Hersh, the famous investigative reporter that used to be with the New York Times that did My Lai and everything else. The guy's incredible. Now, he's clearly as left can be. He hates Trump. He's a dyspeptic guy. He's no BS. And his sources in the intelligence community say that Brennan cooked up a disinformation program, which a CIA agent can literally do. The agency can do that, and Brennan had the authority to do it. That is to say, you can knowingly and willfully lie as part of a disinformation program, which, of course, is usually intended to see where the disinformation goes so you can figure out who the spies are.
John, I got to jump in here because we're running into a break. When we come back, let's pick up on this deposition. John O'Connor, the author of Postgate and host of the Mysteries of Watergate podcast, as we continue to talk about the Hillary Clinton spygate, if you will. There was Russian collusion, but it was Hillary who colluded with the Russians. Back with more in a moment. Stay with us.
I don't need to tell you how important building and sustaining a healthy immune system is these days. And just in time, my good friends at Get the Tea are offering a special package called the Immune Builder. You get 1 month's supply of Life Change Super Tea. That's 8 bags. 1 bottle of Bioastin. That's 75 capsules. Now, Bioastin, or astaxanthin, is known as one of nature's most powerful antioxidants and provides a wide range of impressive health benefits. The Immune Builder also includes 1 bottle of Potent C Wild Alaskan Sockeye Omegas. That's 90 gel caps. And 1 copy of the book Natural Astaxanthin, Hawaii's Super Nutrient by Dr. William Sears. There's so much more than tea at getthetea.com. Get your Immune Builder right now. Not available in any store. Use the code UNLIMITED and all your purchases shipped for free. The Immune Builder from getthetea.com.
This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Follow Richard on Twitter at Richard Syrett. For show information, visit the website strangeplanet.ca.
With Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio.
All right, John O'Connor stays with us. This is a short segment, John, but we're talking about the Clinton spy scandal and Special Counsel John Durham and his recent filings relating to a Clinton campaign lawyer, Michael Sussman, who hired tech people who had contracts in the Trump Tower and in the Trump White House, and they put together this pastiche, a white paper, which basically a false narrative. They framed candidate Trump, and when that didn't work and he was elected, they tried to frame President Trump and derail his presidency with this whole Russian collusion hoax. It turns out there was Russian collusion, but it was between the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Russians. But you have this you mentioned this deposition, you say very few people have read. It involves Seymour Hersh, former New York Times reporter, and his investigation of former CIA head John Brennan?
Well, his inside sources say that Durham did not indict and decided not to make a target of Brennan because Brennan could point to, even though he said false things. Remember, all this is about saying false things within your jurisdiction. And Brennan said a lot of false things, but one of his potential defenses was I was in a disinformation campaign. So while Brennan is truthfully, get this, he's truthfully telling the White House, along with Comey, in July, of 2020, that Hillary is cooking up this ridiculous story. Everybody knows that she's cooking it up to try to blame her woes about the DNC server on to Trump collusion. Everybody knows that. The Russians know it. Their intelligence people, Brennan's sources from Russian intelligence, his agent there, tells them that the Russians know that Hillary's doing this. And apparently Putin's okay with it. He lets it happen. But they know it's happening. Okay, so Brennan is truthful there behind the scenes. Later on, he is truthful in giving Comey an investigative referral for him to investigate Hillary for cooking up this false story. Now, what I've never been able to figure out is, well, first of all, this comes out, and then meanwhile, Brennan is out in public saying everything Trump did was nothing short of treason, blah, 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 blah. He gives this briefing to Harry Reid in August of 2016, and Harry comes out guns a-blazing, really just sort of spouting the Steele dossier stuff. Well, that's probably a false statement he told Harry Reid. However, why does he get off? Because he has a disinformation program. He's got a budget for a disinformation program. And so I think Durham said, hey, I'm not going to touch this. It's the CIA. They can have disinformation programs. He knows this stinks. He knows why Brennan did it. He did it for political purposes, but he had a disinformation program. So that is how Brennan gets off. Now, the other thing that is interesting for your audience, Richard, is this. What is very apparent, especially after reading Seymour Hersh's deposition, is that we get back to the murder of Seth Rich that nobody likes to talk about.
Yes, who is upset at the treatment of his guy, Bernie Sanders, by the Clinton campaign, and may have been the one that hacked into the DNC emails, leaked them to WikiLeaks. It may have been him, and some are speculating that's why he was the victim of an apparent botched robbery that was covered up by the Washington mayor and the police, and we still don't know what hospital he was taken to, still no ballistic reports.
Right. Now, there's some reports out of that are confidential, or where people, the sources remain confidential, that they say that people couldn't get into Seth Rich's room and they should have been able to save him. But put that aside, a fellow named Brian Huddleston filed a suit to get FBI's investigation on this. And the FBI has been very pushback. They pushed back not to give documents, but he got a few documents. In one of the FBI documents that he got from his Freedom of Information Act request, the FBI said, we can understand why someone may have wanted to pay for Seth Rich's death. There also is some indication in the files that there was some communication between Seth Rich and someone from Julian Assange's WikiLeaks. And I think the story is that Rich was a disgruntled Bernie bro who realized what had happened, and the DNC had been trumped up by Hillary fixed by Hillary to oppose Bernie. That therefore there was a leak, not a hack. Now the big story on the left was, Russia's hacked the DNC. Russia did not hack the DNC. Let's get away from Seth Rich. There's a group of very left-leaning former intelligence cybersecurity people who came up with, they're called VIPS, and VIPS is very, very well respected. They were very anti-Bush in the run-up to the Iraq War and so forth. These guys say there's no way that this was a Russian hack. This was a leak from someone inside and so forth. So now what we have is there's a leak from inside. Hillary knows that Assange is going to release all this stuff. She comes up with this Russian collusion thing to take the sting out of it. The moment Assange releases the emails that kill Hillary about Bernie, that's July 22nd. about 2 days later, Robbie Mook, the campaign manager, is saying, oh, Trump-Russian collusion, this is what did it, blah, 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 blah. They're working together on this. The Russians hacked it to help Trump. Jake Sullivan is tweeting it. Hillary's tweeting it. Jennifer Palmieri is taking her golf cart around the convention to tell everybody that this is a Russian plot. So this is what gave birth. Now, they knew this was coming. By the way, they knew this was coming since April 22nd for various technical reasons. They saw that somebody had done something in the server. It takes a while before Assange can release all these emails. It probably started April 22nd. The thing continued through May sometime, the leaking. But in any case, what we have is a very sinister aspect to this, that shoe may end up dropping also. I think it will come out that, I hate to say this, and I know Rich's parents don't like to be involved in this, but this looks very, very saturnine. Let me put it that way, that something like this has happened. And, you can probably connect his murder up. I hate to say it, but, there was a lot going on. There was an internal leak, and maybe it's just a coincidence that he gets shot. If, in fact, he was the leaker, Richard, he would be the only person on the face of the earth that, from firsthand knowledge, would be able to testify that there was no Russian hacking, that it was a leak.
There you go. Okay, John, you got to step away. We'll come back and finish up. John O'Connor, the host of the Mysteries of Watergate podcast and author of Postgate, postgatebook.com, postgatebook.com. Back with more of our conversation right after these.
If you're sure your phone isn't
The truth will set you free. But first, it will really tick you off. Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We're now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return your seats and food trays to their upright position and make sure your carry-on luggage is safely stowed. You're about to leave everything you know behind. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Strange Planet.
with Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard, call 416-360-0740 or toll free 1-866-740-4740.
John O'Connor is with us, U.S. Attorney, represented Mark Felt, the former Deputy Director of the FBI during the Watergate era, and Mark Felt turned out to be none other than Deep Throat. And John is also the author of Postgate, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, his client, covered up Watergate and began today's partisan advocacy journalism. He's also the host of the Mysteries of Watergate podcast, which is absolutely terrific and spellbinding, and you can subscribe and also get the book at postgatebook.com. So, John, let me just ask you a little bit back up here and ask you something about the Office of Special Counsel and John Durham. How does he? I mean, how is he able to continue to operate under the Attorney General Merrick Garland, who's Biden's guy? I mean, Biden may end up implicated in all this as well. How much? I mean, how much leash is Merrick Garland giving the Special Counsel John Durham, and can he shut it down?
Well, he's looking at Durham, and Durham is very wary, very cautious. And you notice whenever you hear anything from Durham, it is in an appropriate court pleading. Because Durham has the authority to tell us things, like Lassie, he is telling us things. He tells things in proper court pleadings. And so that's what I've been following, because he's giving us hints, like Sussman's indictment for not telling James Baker, who he represented. Durham also gets into and foreshadows the Alpha Bank falsity, which has not yet been indicted, which he'll get 5 or 6 people on. But my point is, he is telling us this only in a proper forum. He does not leak. he does not do anything improper, because if he did, he could then arguably, with Merrick Garland looking at everything he does, Merrick Garland could say, okay, you have violated Justice guidelines, I'm firing you. That's the only recourse Garland has. It's under the Justice Department guidelines. He cannot remove Durham but for cause, and cause is clearly outlined as not one of the things being not following the guidelines. So Durham is not going to get caught. He's going to do everything by the book, but he knows that Merrick Garland is just waiting to pounce on him. Now, the second thing, of course, that he's dealing with is everybody he indicts will not be anxious to turn, because there are going to be people that could rat out Hillary, for example, but they're not going to do it. There are people that could rat out Comey, but they're not going to do it. I don't think Comey's going to get indicted. But they all know, the people that are indicted, that if they just hold firm, they're going to get rewarded by their fellow travelers, and they will probably get pardoned or commuted. So Biden has that power, and I think the whispers are going to come out, if they haven't come out already. You know, don't worry about anything. Everybody hold fast. Just yell at them as being, yell at the right as being conspiratorial idiots. You know, this is just all a big conspiracy theory. And then, of course, after you get convicted, we'll then say, oh, this is all terrible, I'm going to pardon you. But that's the plan.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about some of the other characters involved. We have Mark Elias, who was the general counsel to the Clinton campaign. So is he sort of 1 degree closer to Hillary himself? He worked at the Clinton campaign law firm Perkins. Is it Coie? How do you pronounce that? Perkins Coie?
It's Coie.
Yeah, Coie.
Coie. Elias was Sussman's partner and is, like you say, a degree closer to Hillary. Talked to her all the time. But I don't think he's going to turn on Hillary. He's one of the people that could turn on Hillary. The other person I think may get indicted that could turn on Hillary is Biden's NSA, Jake Sullivan. I think he has a good shot. I mean, I would put my money on an even money bet. I would bet he would get indicted for the Alpha Bank server story. I think he's on the emails. But there's another guy that could roll over on Hillary, because he and she were the ones who cooked up the Russian plot. So if she conspired with him to get this, any of the stories, any of the false stories, there are several of them, any of them to go to the FBI, she's a conspirator, and he could nail her. But unfortunately for all of us who like justice, he's going to not rat. If he gets indicted, he won't rat. So Elias and Sullivan are two that could rat. Perhaps Robbie Mook, if he gets indicted, or Jennifer Palmieri could too. They're not going to rat. So that's about it that could get Hillary. I think those are the people that are closest to her.
What if and we should point out Jake Sullivan, before he was Biden's national security advisor, and he was involved in the Clinton campaign. He was going on all the chat shows, also playing up this, this collusion. And now, lo and behold, he's national security advisor, and perhaps helping, is overseeing this situation between Russia and Ukraine. What if John Durham were to stretch this out, this investigation, and continue it, into 2024? Let's say Trump regains the White House, and Biden can no longer pardon all of these people. Could Durham last that long?
Well, that's a good question. Everybody, you've just asked a brilliant question, Richard. Everybody has been carping on poor Durham with COVID and first the Mueller investigation, where Barr couldn't appoint anybody. Then Durham gets appointed. COVID comes him, and you may have come up with the brilliant idea that that maybe he could keep this going. Now the problem is that if I'm Biden, and I know is looking, let's say he's looking at, I'll use an example. Let's say he's still looking at Jake Sullivan for something. You can pardon somebody even before they're charged with a crime. You can just come the way Richard Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford. Before Richard Nixon got indicted, you just come up and say, "Okay, I'm going to pardon you for any crimes that you have committed well, you can name the subject matter or any and all. Now, one of the wonderful powers of the pardoning power is in Washington, D.C., where unlike every other place in the country where you have a state law and you can pardon somebody federally, but it doesn't affect your state law rights. Only in one place in the United States is that not true, and that's Washington, D.C., where you don't have a state law. Every local crime, like spitting on the sidewalk, is a federal crime. And so the president does not have power to pardon me if I'm caught for spitting on the sidewalk, unless it's a federal crime in San Francisco. But if I spit on the sidewalk in Washington, D.C., he has that power. And so there's no other alternative jurisdiction that can get me. So that power, that pardon power, is very close, very powerful, and very all-inclusive for crimes committed within the District of Columbia, which all these are.
Well, unless they get Jake Sullivan and Mark Elias and ultimately Hillary, I don't know, indict them in the state of New York for what happened at Trump Tower. I don't know.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, if you got a conservative there, and also there were some crimes in Virginia, for example, but once again, all these are blue or purple states. But you're right. If like, for instance, some stuff may happen in Langley, et cetera, you've got stuff happening in Trump Tower. But once again, you've got blue attorney generals, and is Letitia James going to do anything? Probably not. So what I'm suggesting is that, I think it's enough that Sussman gets, and I don't care really about the punishment anyway. It's not going to help anybody out to a long term in jail. They're not going to burgle your house when they get out. So just indicting them and convicting them tells the story to the American people that I think is very salutary.
Right. And it drives a stake. It drives a final stake into Hillary's aspirations for the White House, I think.
Right. It's about time, because she got off this Robert Ray, who's a good guy, but everybody had Clinton fatigue after Monica Gate. And the real person in the Clinton scandal was Hillary, that was doing all the stuff. All Bill did was, unzip his pants a few times. But Hillary was the one who was into Filegate, Travelgate, Billingate, all this stuff. She's diabolical. She told a lot of lies. And then after everybody's tired of Bill Clinton's impeachment, then Robert Ray, the new special prosecutor, comes along and says, okay, he writes a report that really damns Hillary, but says, okay, I'm not going to prosecute her.
John, I got to wrap it up. We're out of time. But thank you so much for this, as always. Postgatebook.com. Postgatebook.com. Thank you so much, John.
Hey, great, Richard. Good talking to you, buddy. See you.
Great job. All right. Always terrific work by John. All right. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Carlos. Back next week with a brand new program. Good night.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.
Hey, 'tis the season to give the perfect gift. C60 Evo organic oil elixirs and facial serum sets. And here with another sleep tip is our good pal, Chris Burrows, co-founder and chief scientist at C60 Evo. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. My next tip regarding getting better sleep is related to electronic devices. So we all have these, this cell phone lying around, or we're using it on a regular basis. What a lot of people don't realize is that those devices give off blue light. That blue light is actually tells our bodies, the only time naturally that we see blue light is at the peak of the sun. So when the sun is up at its peak at noon. And so what those devices do, including your computer terminals, your cell phones, your tablets, is they convince our physiology that it's the middle of the day. You can imagine that if you're watching your cell phone or tablet at 10 p.m. and you've somehow convinced your physiology that it's the middle of the day, this is not good for sleep. So it's really important. Most devices have actually blue light blockers, and you can just go out and Google and how to blue light block on my Samsung device or Apple device. or even on your PC or your Mac. Make sure you turn that on. I know people who leave it on all day so that they're never impacted by that blue light. I would recommend 2 hours before the sun is setting in your local area to turn that on. Obviously doesn't work if you're working on videos or you're working on pictures, but try and turn that on 2 hours early. And the other thing regarding electronic devices, try to keep them out of the bedroom. I recommend that you actually put a charging station outside of your bedroom so that you just don't even bring it in your bedroom. These devices, as we've kind of been reading and hearing, are like geared to trigger our endorphin responses, and so we like to be on them. They keep them up, so keep it out of the bedroom and make sure you got your blue light blocker on about 2 hours before the sun sets. And I always like sharing sleep tips because our most consistent testimonial for our product is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night.
C60 Evo products deliver noticeable benefits to people and pets around the world. Immunity boost, deeper sleep, just like Chris said, more energy, mental balance, flexibility, and longevity. Please visit the website c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. And don't forget, use the coupon code EVRS at checkout, EVRS at checkout, and then you save an extra 10%. That can't wait. All right, Chris, we'll talk again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
A new Richard Serrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.